my name is Caylea Trindade, and for my final Tableau dashboard, I explored the relationship between rural population and internet usage around the world. My goal was to see whether countries with larger rural populations tend to have lower internet usage and what other factors might help explain the differences between countries. The data set comes from the World Development Indicators and includes country-level information from years 2000 through 2024. The two main measures I focused on were the percentage of individuals using the internet and the percentage of each country's population living in rural areas. The data also includes each country's geographic region and income group. For the country-level comparisons, I used the average internet usage and rural population percentages. When designing the dashboard, I wanted each visualization to answer a slightly different question while still connecting back to the overall topic. I started with a scatter plot because it made it easy to see the relationship between rural population and internet usage across countries. As I explored the data, I noticed a clear pattern with income level, so I created a second scatter plot using the same measures, but added a light to dark color scale for income groups. Using similar scatter plots also made it easier to see how adding income provided more context to the original relationship. I added a line chart because I wanted to show how internet usage has changed over time, which is something the scatter plots do not show. Instead of including every region, I focused on 3 regions with noticeably different patterns so that the chart would be easier to compare. Finally, I added the world map to give geographic context and make it easier to see where differences in internet usage are occurring. For the overall design, I used a consistent blue color scheme across the dashboard and only used different colors when they represented something specific, like the 3 regions in the line chart. I also used direct labels where possible instead of adding extra legends. My goal was to keep the dashboard visually consistent while making each chart easy to understand on its own. Now that I've explained some of the decisions behind the dashboard design, I'll switch over to Tableau and walk through my final dashboard and some of the main patterns I found. My overall takeaway from the dashboard is that internet access varies significantly based on where people live and their economic conditions. The dashboard starts with the overall relationship between rural population and internet usage, then adds income, changes over time, and geographic differences to provide more context. The first visualization compares rural population and internet usage using 2024 data. Each point represents a country, and the trend line shows a negative relationship with countries that have larger rural populations generally having lower internet usage. The dashboard is also interactive, so I can hover over individual countries and get more information. For example, Angola has a rural population of about 29%, while about 41% of the population uses the internet. The tooltips allowed me to provide these country-level details without having to label every point on the graph. The second scatter plot adds income group to the same relationship. The darker blue points represent higher income countries, while the lighter points represent lower income countries. There is a clear pattern with higher income countries generally having higher internet usage, while many lower income countries fall much lower on the chart. This adds more context to the first visualization and shows that rural population is only one part of the story. Income also appears to play an important role in the differences between countries. The line chart looks at how internet usage has changed over time. I selected North America, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, rather than showing every region, so the differences between them would be easier to see. Internet usage has increased across all 3 regions, but there are still large gaps. South Asia has seen significant growth in the last years, while Sub-Saharan Africa still remains much lower. For this visualization, I calculated population-weighted internet usage rather than simply averaging all of the countries together. This gives countries with larger populations the appropriate impact on the regional results. The final visualization provides geographic context for the patterns shown in the other charts. Darker countries have higher internet usage, while lighter countries have lower usage. Some of the largest gaps are visible across sub-Saharan Africa. This map is also interactive. For example, hovering over Madagascar shows that about 68% of its population is rural, while only about 19% use the internet. Madagascar is also classified as a low-income country in sub-Saharan Africa, so it's a good example of how different patterns in the dashboard can overlap within an individual country. Putting all of these pieces together also came with a few challenges along the way. One of the biggest challenges I ran into was getting all 4 visualizations to fit on one dashboard while keeping everything readable. Once I combined the individual worksheets, I had to adjust the chart size, title, and labels and spacing several times to create a balanced layout without making anything feel too crowded. I also found it challenging to keep the formatting consistent across different types of charts. The scatter plot, line chart, and maps all display information differently, so I had to think about which elements should stay consistent and where differences were actually useful. For example, I kept blue as the main color throughout the dashboard, but used separate colors for the regional lines because the viewer needed to easily distinguish between the 3 regions. This project showed me that dashboard design takes a lot of refining. Even after the individual charts were finished, I still had to make changes once I put everything together. I learned that keeping the design simple and consistent can make the main patterns much easier to understand. Overall, this project gave me a much better understanding of how thoughtful design choices can turn a large amount of data into a clear and meaningful story. Thank you.